Hello, everyone. This is October 20th, 2019, and we welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, and we're so glad you all could join us. We'll start with morning prayer.
This is from the Blue Book. Beloved Father, Mother, God, give me wisdom to meet the problems I may have to meet today. Give me understanding to deny error and to proclaim the truth. Give me grace to keep silent when speech is unnecessary. There is no strife, for truth, risen truth, will destroy error of every sort. And heaven is right here. God gives abundance of intelligence and opportunity. I cannot be impoverished mentally, physically, spiritually, or financially. God is substance, and I reflect that substance.
Florence's voice hasn't changed. She just had a new little grandbaby yesterday, so she's going to be on mute for a while. Okay.
She's busy on a holy mission.
Yeah, a very holy mission, yes. And much love to all her family. Okay, Linda, the watching point.
Watch number 60. Watch lest the salt lose its savor, or that you endeavor either to express humanity without having established the basis, or divinity, of which the humanity is the outward expression, or try to be absolute without any application to the human need. Science and Health says, quote, the divinity of the Christ was made manifest in the humanity of Jesus, end quote. Divine science is expressed in Christian science. If the humanity or salt comes to occupy first place in your thought, you may drop the divinity and become all salt. If you seek divinity without expressing it in humanity, the salt loses its savor. The effect of divinity applied to humanity is to give life to a flavor as it heals and blesses man. When one fails to express divinity in humanity, in loving helpfulness, compassion, unselfishness, and self-sacrifice for others, the salt loses its savor, since the salt savors life only so long as it is the right expression of divinity. The so-called absolute scientist, if he saw a man getting soaking wet in the rain, would declare, never mind, above the clouds the sun is shining. The student seeking to express humanity would hand the man an umbrella to use until the storm was over. He would be ready for the absolute teaching, which would show him that even while it was raining and there were dark clouds, the sun was not affected by them, but continued to shine.
Thank you. Please, someone's making a lot of noise. Sharon's going to have to start muting people. I know you don't mean to, but the mic is very, very sensitive. So if you're muted and you need to speak, you can unmute yourself, but otherwise...
Be in a quiet place.
Yeah, and
if you can.
If you can. Okay. All right. Comments on that watching point.
It reminds me of what Mary read last week with the testimony of the person who was injured playing football and had everybody, supposed Christian scientists, telling him that everything was okay and that nothing happened. And they refused to deal with the human need, which was that he was not feeling okay and he needed some sort of human help, and they denied it to him, and he, the testimony of how he suffered and what he went through because of that. And I think that's pretty common. I think this is a really important watching point.
Thank you very much, Michael. Took the words right out of my mouth. Yes. It's exactly what it's addressing, what we read last week with that dear fellow in Texas.
One more comment.
Sure.
Just that somebody once told me an article that their teacher had written, but the gist of it was that they said the word love is a verb. Love is a do. Love is a be. Is to be something, to do something. It's not just feeling it and then not acting on it.
Thank you. This is how science gets so misused. It has to be the combination. Love without principle is a jellyfish, and principle without love is an iceberg. And when Christian Scientists can get the bit in their teeth and think they're doing right and get very bossy and decide what's right for the other person, whether it is or not, it can be very disastrous.
It can be a millstone around their neck, a stone upon their heart, and it will turn them off to so-called science for a long, long time.
And certainly compassion. What does Mrs. Eddy say over and over? Pitiful patience with their fears. Compassion must accompany the science, the love, the Christianity. It's the combination. And this does not happen overnight. This is something that you work on. We've all made mistakes in this department, I'm sure. I have. I know. So we work on this. This isn't about anything but Father, what would you have me do? It's reflection. It's not human pushing and do-goody or ignoring, as that boy, he's a man now, but he wrote in his letter, pretending and ignoring the problem. That is not Christian Science. I thought it was interesting that, I guess it was Ray in Florida on the forum, she wrote about oneness and discussing the fact it's quality and not quantity. And how that, I guess she was quoting some other writer, but how that left an impression on her. And I was thinking about that too. So what would that mean? Quality, oneness with the Father is quality, not quantity.
Well, the way she said it was like it was the quality of the reflection of God that we do. We don't have to pretend to be somebody else. We just have to reflect God the best we can in the life He's given us to live. That's what I took from it.
Thank you.
We have the ability to express all the qualities that God is where we are and to the extent that we can and is needed to bless mankind. God is all the truth. We don't have to know all the truth. We just have to know enough of the truth to meet the need today. And if we do, we will start tomorrow with knowledge of a little bit more of the truth than we did yesterday.
Thank you. That's a beautiful explanation. I also think of quantity, running around smartly and accomplishing not much. Trying to see how many things you can do for somebody, whether they want it done or not. That's not expressing God. That's human will and human planning and human outlining. The quality is whatever you do is done with love, with peace, with dominion, and mainly with reflection.
And that means in obedience to the one mind.
Shardy sent me something this week from the Cross and the Crown, the book by someone named Beasley. And in the introduction, he writes, In 1875, seldom more than 20 persons gathered for Sunday services in a small rented hall in Lynn, Massachusetts. 25 years afterwards, a new church edifice was being built every 4 days. Now, wherever Christianity is preached, there are teachings of Christian Science. Coming in the humblest, most unobtrusive guise, the healing of a sick woman, it is a movement without parallel in modern history. As the discoverer and founder of Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy made the decision to measure the strength of her church by the depth of the understanding, and not by the numbers of its members. It was this decision which permitted her to require of her followers that, as she said in her 1901 message to the Mother Church, they follow, quote, their leader only so far as she follows Christ, end quote. By its very wording, this was a call that included obedience to the instructions: heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils, and a summons to return to the full teachings of the Master by restoring to Christianity the practice of healing. I love that, because it's true of us today now. It's the quality. How deep is your understanding? That's what counts, not how many. We always looked at how many. It could be very discouraging. It's the quality. Again, it's a good thought to think about. And it goes with what Ray was writing as well. So along these lines, too, the meeting Wednesday was beautiful and the testimonies were beautiful. And we had our organist, Jared, who usually plays on Sunday. He came for the second time.
On a Wednesday.
On a Wednesday, yes, because Jim hasn't been able to come. He's had other obligations, although we hope he will come back. But anyway, Jared was commenting on a testimony after the service. It had reached him in some way. He was going to share it with his wife when he got home. So I bring this out. Always remember, new people are listening. Do not speak the jargon. Speak simply. Tell of your healings, and you can, get out healings that you've had, that you've testified before too. Just give them in a different way, but something that will reach the heart. Because if it will, these people will go away fortified. The new people, we're not just talking to each other. And everyone did on Wednesday. That was good. Okay. And how many do we have on Wednesday? We had 166 or something.
Yes, 166.
166 people were listening. So they're coming, and they need to be fed. And all our meetings, everyone, Wednesday, Sunday, everything we do should have the substance and the authority of Christ behind it. This reaching, as the watch message said last night, millions of unprejudiced minds. The subject today is Doctrine of Atonement. Our golden text is Galatians 3. For ye are all the children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. And I'd like to talk about the responsive reading. Joe, and I guess Shardy wrote too, because I love this. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part thou shalt make me to know wisdom. Anyone want to comment on that?
What is the inward parts?
I think it means deep in your soul.
Thank you.
I was thinking your heart. It has to be in your heart.
It is your consciousness.
Yeah.
I mean, we are always conscious of something. We are always aware. We're always thinking something. This is a call to be conscious of the truth.
Joe wrote that God demands that I courageously and honestly look deep within myself, search my innermost motives, and be willing to face any error that lurks there. Well, this can be interpreted many ways. It can be your consciousness, but I think of it, and I've given going into your inward parts, whatever, you have something that ails you somewhere inside, this truth is going to go in and find it and heal it. Much more better than a pill, as people say, how does a pill know where to go? It goes deep within. Yes, your soul, it searches. And the hidden part, make me know wisdom. Maybe you have something that's tripping you up, but you can't seem to know what it is you're doing wrong all the time. That hidden part. I mean, that's more to what Gary said, your consciousness, or what Joe was speaking to. God, it's like a big searchlight that comes, and nothing can hide from it. And it will be brought out for healing, and you will understand and know how to do better if you allow this process to work. Because God desires this truth in the inward parts. So take it in. It will heal every smidgen of you if you let it.
That was all helpful. I also thought about your deepest concerns.
Yes, thank you. Your deepest concerns. Thank you very much. And then to make you know wisdom, you'll know how to deal with the situation, your deep concerns. Let it go in to purify yourself and cleanse yourself. It's a powerful statement. I do remember Mrs. Evans giving that to us years ago, and I've always thought of it that way. And if you're having a problem with one of your so-called organs or whatever, your heart, your stomach, whatever, take the truth in those inward parts, the law of God, and let it adjust it. It will.
Reminds me of your testimony about incurable.
All right.
I think of that a lot.
Yes. Nothing is incurable. The cure is always, if all the medicals say they can't do it, all the other things say they can't do it, well, that means the cure must come from within, a change from within, the kingdom of God within, as was in last week's lesson. Let unselfishness, goodness, justice,
Mercy,
love, the kingdom of heaven reign within us. That's taking the truth to your inward parts. And what's the last part of that?
Sin, disease, and death will diminish until they finally disappear.
Yes. Diminish until they finally disappear. And all these things that we're talking about, this is talking about maintaining our oneness with the Father. This is how we do it. Keep our oneness. Keep connected to Him. Let Him be everything to us. And He will be. He wants to be.
You know that Mrs. Eddy, before you're supposed to say before you say your grace, she has, I found it, you're to declare that there is nothing that can come between you and your oneness with God. Then you say your grace.
Very nice.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm. See, everything she did, she brought the Father in with her. And this is the prayer unceasing. I remember someone, and he was supposedly a good worker, saying, "Oh, well, there's no way you can pray without ceasing." Well, you can work at it. I mean, if you've got God with you, yeah. I disagree. We wouldn't be told to do it if we couldn't.
And we wouldn't be told to do it if it wasn't for our own benefit, for our good.
Yes. Now, Linda spoke on the forum about obedience, and I certainly struck me in the lesson. There was a lot on obedience. And obedience, again, this is how you demonstrate your oneness with the Father. And what did Mrs. Eddy tell someone once when they said they didn't get it, so they couldn't obey?
She said, do it before you, or obey before you understand. And then the understanding will come then after that.
Thank you. Very, very true. For people who sit in their prayer chair and don't take action because they want to understand everything before they do anything, well, they're going to sit in their prayer chair forever. You got to work out the problem. You got to get out of your prayer chair and start doing whatever it is that is being required of you in science and health and in the Bible. And then the understanding comes, just like you can't understand a math problem that you've never worked out. You can read about how you should work it out and all this and read and study, but you got to sit down and do the problem. And then you get, oh, wow, I get it. So what did you write about obedience, Linda?
Yeah, I wrote about it because I was instructed to think more about obedience this week when I called for practitioner support. And it was using the lesson, which I'm very grateful to be doing that. It made me think deeper about it, so I was grateful for being alerted to that. But I liked some of the definitions I found, and I took the ones that I was feeling I needed to think about. So from Webster's 1828, obey is to comply with the commands, to submit to the direction or control of, to yield. And then in the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, obedience was the performance of what is required, a proper submission to authority. That which duty requires implies dignity of conduct rather than servility. Obedience is the supreme test of faith in God and reverence for Him. And the Old Testament conception of obedience was vital. It was the one important relationship which must not be broken. And then it said, in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed because thou hast obeyed my voice, which I felt was very meaningful to our church since we're reaching out to all the nations. And then I thought, I don't decide whether I want to change the math rules on a whim, so I can't do the same thing with God. I mean, I expect it to work out. So it made me think that a deeper sense of the importance of obedience and exactness of it.
Thank you.
Talking about required reminded me of the calendar quote we had a bit ago from Winston Churchill. He says, it's not enough to do your best. Sometimes you have to do what is required.
Very good. Anyone else on this? It's a most important point, and I gave to many of you this week Martha Wilcox's article, Overcoming by Obedience. It's a powerful article. We'll read some of it during the class and at the end. But
this is why humility is so essential to be able to practice Christian Science, because there are laws that govern the universe. And if we live in accordance with those laws and, quote, obey those laws, they work to our benefit. They bless us. They give us a life that we could never have without obedience to those laws. And, there are a lot of people that have a misconception about who and what God is and don't think it's very fashionable to be obedient. Well, God doesn't ask us to obey things that are unlike him. That's why it's important to have some kind of a conception of who and what God really is. And that's why it's so important to study the textbook daily so that you have in mind the right concept of who and what God is. And that's the right concept of who and what should be obeyed. And when you get to that point, which requires great humility, when you get to that point, it all comes together. If you don't get to that point, everything is confusion. I know we've all experienced that state of confusion. And we don't want to go there anymore.
So, Carol, read citation 4 in the Bible, Matthew 23.
Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore, whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders. But they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted.
Thank you. Now, I am sure that these scribes and Pharisees, they thought they were very obedient, right? Sure. So, I mean, you can make a list of all the things, how to be obedient, and all the things you should or shouldn't do. And this is sort of what we talked about in the very beginning of class, without God in it, without the inspiration, without love. You can obey, and it will be a terrible mess.
And Saul obeyed the law literally as he thought, and he persecuted the Christians. And then he realized that he was obeying the wrong law.
It was kind of like being in school if you copied somebody's homework only to find out that they didn't understand.
Right. That's right.
Then you both fail. So.
Good. And this is what gives religion and religionists such a bad name, because they do all this. But what kind of obedience is the Christ asking us for?
To follow the spirit of the letter, not just the letter itself.
Thank you. Very well said. The spirit of the letter and not just the letter. You can do all these things and still be dead wrong if you just take the letter. It has to be the spirit, and the spirit has to be demonstrated from God. It cannot be humanly won. And you're either listening to God or you're not. It took me a while to figure out with Mrs. Evans, because so often she rebuked people. But when I got to where I saw, well, that person was in the wrong mind. It didn't matter if what they seemed to do was good. They weren't in the right mind. Maybe they were doing it for their own, that self was always part of it. And then other times you'd see people, maybe they weren't, it seemed like maybe they were doing the wrong things, but they got praised. Why?
Because they did it with the right motive.
Their motive was right. They loved. That's what's so wonderful in raising children, because you can make mistakes, but if your motive is love, the children will grow and prosper and they'll bounce back. You can do all the right things, and if your motive is irritation and hate or pride because they're your children and you want them to do it, you'll make a real mess of it. People have a hard time understanding this, but I'm sure none of you do. So
it gets easier when you know the golden rule too. So.
Yes. And you see in the beginning, the first part of that Matthew was all about the Pharisees and what they wanted. They wanted all their pride. They wanted to be called rabbi, sit in the chief rooms. Maybe they memorized everything just so they could be great. And then Christ comes and he speaks all to your motive, to your heart, why you're doing it. We are all brethren. All our master is the Christ. We have no masters. One is our Father, Mother, God. No human sense of fatherhood, parenthood. And the greatest shall be a servant. And if you see anyone who thinks they're great and they're not serving mankind humbly, they're not great. Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, didn't he? He served, and he didn't ask for any of this. And that is why anytime you feel this jealousy, competitiveness rise up in you, I can't tell you how bad it is. You want to let people know how good you are, how great you are, the wonderful deeds you're doing.
Bad idea.
Yeah. If you're really doing it, you don't have to tell anybody. They'll see it and they'll feel it. Is that not true?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I recently read about a minister who had given a wonderful sermon, and people went up to him afterwards and said, "Oh, that was a marvelous sermon." And he said, "I know, the devil already told me." Tried to convince.
Very good. Tear or triumph harms. Triumph can be often
the worst.
Yep. And Carol found this most beautiful article for the next liberator. Our next liberator, I think I told you, it's going to be Observing Christmas and Quietude, which is a quote from where?
From Mrs. Eddy.
Mrs. Eddy, yes, and her What Christmas Means to Me. I've always loved the idea of observing Christmas and quietude. So we've been getting beautiful things for the November issue. And she found this one article that was in an old journal from 1897, I think.
I think so.
And Parthen's actually told me, and I kind of had remembered this. It was actually a little book called The Fourth Wise Men or The Other Wise Men. Mm-hmm. So just tell us briefly about it, Carol.
He was to meet up with the other three wise men, and on his way, he came upon a man dying in the street. So he stopped and he gave him of what he had, some food and some water, and comforted him. And so by the time he got to where the other wise men were, they had left. And they left him a note, and they said that he should come and follow them, come across the desert and follow us and catch up with us. And he thought, how can I possibly do that? I have one spent horse, and I'd have to go. Before this, he sold everything he had, his houses and his everything he had, all his possessions, and he bought three, a ruby, a sapphire, and a pearl. And he was going to give these to the Christ child. So he decided he would have to use one of them and get camels and supplies so that he could cross the desert. And on his way, he came across a child who was not well, and he did something for the child and had to spend one of his gems on that. And every time he started out or went to do something, he helped someone, and he used the gifts to help other people. And then at the end, was the Bible.
33 years later.
33 years later, yeah. It was the Bible statement of what you have done to these little ones, you have done to me.
Yeah.
And it's just the most beautiful story.
Yes. Yep. So even though he didn't make it, he had been deterred. He had been living the Christ, helping others. His motive had been pure and right, and it led him aright. And that beautiful hymn, it matters not what be thy lot. What?
So loved doth God.
So loved of God. So quit your belly aching. All right? I don't care where you are. That's what my dad loved to say to me. I don't care where you are, where you're living, what your lot is in life. I don't care. Quit your belly aching, because it matters not what be thy lot. So love doth guide. Where storm or shine, pure peace is thine, whate'er betide. So wherever you are, is there any reason why love can't guide you? There's never a reason unless you put obstacles up for yourself. And in love guiding you, you will find and you will have everything you need and more so. And if you needed to be lifted out of a situation that's unbearable in some way, that will happen as well. It couldn't help but happen. But your motive has to be pure. You can't do it for yourself or because you want this, that, and the next thing, and you've got your to-do list for God, because that's not love with a capital L.
I'd just like to say this past Wednesday when I read my testimony, it had bothered me before why it took like 2 tries of asking God to finally get the real answer. But when I was reading it, I realized the first time I had instantly like tried to figure out what to do myself, and then I fell back in. But then the second time I realized, okay, God, whatever you want from me. And then it happened. So I was really glad to finally realize that. So.
And what did happen? How did you get yourself here?
Oh my! My very first call was to my practitioner, which I didn't know she was I didn't know anything about practitioners at the time, but I called her and.
Well, actually, it was the other way around. She called you.
Oh.
I called you.
It was kind of a blurry time, I gotta be honest.
I called you because, yes, and wondered why you weren't coming to a place, and then you explained. So I called you. But that's how God works. When you're listening, you hear the need. And it was a need. And it came to me to call him. And that's the difference between demonstrating and self-willing. And that's reflection, where you're hearing it and getting it from God. And then you can never do the wrong thing or cause other troubles. because it's from God and you feel at peace about it. It's not pushing your own agenda. And that must always be. And Parthens wrote a lot about being earnest, how important that, I'm going to talk about that quote. If the disciple is advancing spiritually, he is striving to enter in. He constantly turns away from the material sense and looks toward the imperishable things of spirit. If honest, he will be earnest from the start and gain a little each day in the right direction, till at last he finishes his course with joy. These are all attributes of obedience. He's advancing spiritually. He's striving to enter in. He's constantly turns away from material sense. If honest, he will be earnest. And that word, he gives many definitions, but ardent, in the pursuit of an object, eager to obtain, having a longing desire, warmly engaged or incited. Warmly engaged. Not coldly, but warmly.
And what's the difference between warmly and coldly? Is there love in your heart or not? If you have a love for the science, if you have a love for the truth, you will be in earnest. If you're indifferent to what's true, then you're not ready. You're just not going to, it's just, you're not there. You're too wrapped up in yourself or too wrapped up in something else.
I had to realize that so much of my motive was fear. I was driven. Mr. Evans used to always ask me, "What's driving you?" I was driven by fear. I always wanted to do the right thing, and that's fear. It wasn't God.
It wasn't love.
And it wasn't love. And usually it did not bless. If all the time it didn't bless. How could it bless if I was pushing out of fear to do the right thing? It was all about me. The only way you can do the right thing is to get quiet and hear God's voice. And then comes the humility to hear and obey. And then know it was only God that did it, no personal sense about it. Otherwise you lose it. You can't get it again if you think, "Oh, look how great I am or was." Can't be. And I love the first edition of that statement on page 21 of Science and Health that I just read. And I've given this before too, but it's always made me think quite a bit. In the first edition, Mrs. Eddy says, "Unless a man advances spiritually, he is not scientific. And if he is scientific, he must start honestly and journey some every day. And however long he is in reaching the desired goal, if his honesty be preserved, he will finish his course." Unless you're honest, you can't do this. And this honesty, this goes into your inward parts, purifying yourself. Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it from a standpoint of love, or are you just fear motivated? You want to do some good thing for somebody? And you have to be brutally honest with yourself to figure this out. Because, for years, I thought, I'm doing the right thing. I'm trying to be so good. How dare you question me? I'm being a good person. Because I wasn't honest. Maybe it was my highest right of good then. But honestly, I was motivated by fear, pleasing people, self-will. And you can't be a reflection if you are entertaining the adamant of error, which is
self-love,
self-will,
self-will,
self-justification.
and sometimes doing things from pride also. See how great I am. Look at what a wonderful thing I did.
Yes.
Right. And that's also fear, because pride is just the other side of the same coin as fear is on. People are proud because they're fearful.
Well, it's a dependency on self and on man rather than on God. And along with the pride, as we've said, comes the shame. Then you feel so terrible about what you did. So think about it, and think about what your lot is. Matters not what be thy lot. And ask yourself, are you letting God love guide you? And if you are, is there any reason to be a discontented mortal?
No.
No. There's no reason to be a discontented mortal. You're letting love guide you. And do we all have equal opportunity in this?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We do. That's why it was a quote from the Red Book. I should have brought it today, but I didn't. That Joanne quoted Wednesday night, where she said, "What is discouragement?" It's wanting a place you haven't earned. It's really a good definition of all of this.
She used the word impatience.
Yes, impatience, right.
That meant a lot to me.
Very true. Impatience, you're impatient for what you want. Why hasn't this worked out? Well, if it hasn't worked out, I can say with 100% conviction, there are more things to learn, there's more things to do, there's more love to be expressed, more lessons learned.
A little more grace.
Yes, a few truths tenderly told, life consecrated, as Mrs. Eddy says in her article. This is what has to be. And this is a moment by moment living it. And if you are belly aching, you're missing the opportunities that love is standing by to give you. You've closed your heart to it. And so you become ineffective in every way. And you don't have to. So, overcoming by obedience, and that is demonstrating our oneness with the Father, because the only way we can do it is truly by being obedient, not by legalistically being obedient, as Michael said, the letter without the spirit, but the combination of both. So we will end with Martha Wilcox, part of her article. If you haven't read it recently, you should. It's wonderful. All her articles are, but this one, very good. Here. Yes, going there.
Okay. Mrs. Eddy gives the following instructions, quote, "We must realize the ability of mental might to offset human misconceptions and to replace them with the life which is spiritual, not material," end quote. Science and Health. We do not have to overcome evil persons or evil conditions in order to be liberated from our problems. But we liberate ourselves by overcoming the mesmeric suggestions wielded by the carnal mind that man is a person and is a cause of evil conditions. We, like David, should not be mesmerized by evil presentations, even though it presents the appearance of great power, activity, domination, war, etc. Much of the time, even Christian scientists are giving power to the Goliaths of today, when we should be using the small round stone for true understanding to destroy the mesmerism of life and intelligence in matter. When erroneous mental pictures seem to confront us, we should realize the necessity of overcoming them instantly. Mrs. Eddy says, error comes to you for life, and you give it all the life it has. From an old journal. Our present world is not outside of us. It is a mental world, a state of consciousness. And we, like Jesus, are to overcome the entire mental concept of it. Overcoming is always a mental contest within the consciousness of the individual, a contest between our understanding of the spiritual fact that God is all and the belief in a misconception that evil is presence and power. Our enemies are purely mental. They are our human thoughts and fears, our misconceptions of man as personal, and our universe as material. Our spiritual ascent above the finite material sense of a personal selfhood and a material world is made within the realm of our individual consciousness. We overcome only by obedience to the truth of being.
Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.